All right, good morning, everyone. We are live, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone. We are with Hostel Management's newest online panel discussion. This one is over staff bonding and team building and morale and getting everyone together. So we have a great group of people today that are going to talk about a lot of good things related to this. So I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves. We'll start with Bebeto and Kim, if you guys want to tell us your names, what hostels you're involved with, and where you're located.
Hi, well, I'm Bebeto. I'm from Lifetime Hostels in Brazil. And currently I'm here in South Africa with
Kim from Once Hostels, which is once in Cape Town and once in Joburg.
Awesome, thanks. And yeah, they are coming from South Africa, so their internet connection is a little struggling. So we've got their audio, and hopefully we'll get your video as well most of the time. And Marton and Vesna?
Hi, we are from Budapest. It's afternoon here, 4. So we are actually right in the middle of doing our stuff in the hostel. We are in the hostel. Probably you don't see this because we just painted this wall back, in the back white, because we're putting new decoration in the hostel. So I'm kind of, okay, she's the one who really runs the business because she's the manager. So she knows a lot more about this topic than me, but I also have ideas because I was running hostels. I'm running hostels since 10 years. I had a hostel in Mexico for 1.5 years, and we're still running 2 hostels in Budapest and 1 in Spain, the Canary Islands. And we all over, we have volunteers as well.
Okay, great. And you are Vesna, right?
Yes.
Cool. And you're managing, sorry?
I'm just pretty. I'm managing 2 hostels that are here in Budapest, Big Fish and Bazaar.
Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you guys all for joining us. My name's Courtney. I'm the editor at Hostel Management, many-year hostel manager and hostel consultant, and working on opening my own hostel. So excited to talk to you guys. We're going to jump right in just to give everyone an overview of what the discussion will look like. We're going to start with just some simple questions of kind of what your hostel makeup is. Do you use volunteers versus paid staff? You know, how many, all that. Then kind of what your staff style is in terms of people interacting. You know, do they want to? What types of things do they like to do together? And then we'll move into what kinds of activities you guys do. How does that tend to work out? Do you have any issues with it? Stuff like that. So that's kind of the general overview that we're going to talk about, and we'll see how it goes. So first question, Bebeto, we'll start with you. Generally, how many staff do you have? Are these full-time or part-time? And do they include volunteers?
Yeah, well, when we started in São Paulo, we had, normally our volunteer was some foreigner work, and we had like full-time staff. Things have changed a lot in Brazil these days. World Packers became a big thing in Brazil. So a lot of hostels, including us, we moved kind of towards like almost the whole staff as volunteers. Also, there's a lot of demand for that now because they travel, and there's a lot of people travel around the year, so a lot more volunteers in every position.
All right, great. And Kim?
So over the 2 hostels, we've got about 45 staff, permanent staff, mostly in housekeeping, maintenance, front of house, those departments. And then we've got what we call our CEO program, which is the Chief Entertainment Officer. And their job is basically just to like delight people and help carry bags and sort of help in any department when we need backup. And those people are all sourced from workaway.info. Yeah, we work within the workaway guidelines of like, you know, 25 hours a week for free accommodation and free food. And in Cape Town, they stay a minimum of 3 months. And in Johannesburg, a minimum of 1 month.
It's the volunteers that have those minimums?
Yes. Yeah.
And your paid staff, they are generally full-time or part-time? Or is it mixed?
They're like 99% of them are full-time.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
And Martin and Vesna, what about you for your hostels?
I apologize for my boss being drunk. It's that time of the day. So we work with volunteers and with receptionists as well. We usually have 4 receptionists and 4 volunteers. And volunteers we usually get, like most of them would come from Workaway and HelpX as well. But funny thing is that we have a lot of volunteers that are our guests and want to stay to volunteer, and these are the best usually.
Of course, yeah. And your paid staff, are they full-time or part-time?
Full-time.
Okay.
So 8 hours.
Okay. So moving then to the next question of how long people generally stay. We kind of touched on that, but do your full-time staff, starting with you guys, your paid staff, do they generally stay for quite a while, or is there a high turnaround? I know volunteers turn over for a while, or pretty frequently, but what about your
catch up with receptions, because we, of course, everybody deals with young people. I'm young, it's just something is wrong with the camera here. Receptionists are usually young, and then if you want young, intelligent, sweet people, they usually, after a while, they leave because this is not their dream job, unfortunately.
Well,
So
if they are young, this is their dream job, but
yeah, but
they're
once
getting
they
old,
finish university, exactly, once they get old, like him, then they leave. They become managers, but yeah, but usually like I would say like a year. If you get like even more than a year, yeah.
Okay.
But basically, also answering your question, our staff is mainly locals,
Yeah.
and they are staying in their job most of the time. Some of them they are with us for the high season only for 3-4 months, but most of them they are staying for more than a year. But volunteers, we're not taking volunteers more than 2 months.
Okay.
He doesn't really know we do. He doesn't know.
Okay, sometimes it happens, but
Generally, yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And Kim.
I guess you know what happens when a volunteer starts to feel too comfortable or too much at home, or they kind of start taking over different fields or feel like they have to take over and they have to teach other volunteers and control their staff or job or whatever. So
If anyone wants more information on that, that was actually our last panel discussion, was all on volunteers and work exchange. So there's some great info on that. So anyone listening who wants to check that out, you should. Kim and Bebeto, for your paid staff, how long do people tend to stay?
Well, turnover was always high. As I said, it's not exactly a dream job. That's the temporary dream job. But I would say that 6 months would be an average. We've had people for over a year, but not that many.
Okay. And Kim, what about you?
Well, I think for the first year we had pretty high staff turnover, and then we kind of changed the way we do it, and now, so for the last like 2.5 years, I don't think anyone's left, which is for us really cool. But I think what's important to note is that you have a lot of unemployment. So I mean, I think 30% unemployment maybe, and a lot of people who don't have a formal tertiary education. So with our job, we really like with the reception in front of house, we realized we could hire people. They just walk through the door. They've got like a bit of an attitude, fun personality, and then we can teach them the skills. And I think we've maybe got like 2 people who've studied hospitality. The rest are all just really cool people. And then we've trained them in-house. And the other thing that we do with our volunteers and our staff is that they have to...
They have what? Sorry, it cut out.
If you're a full-time housekeeper, so if you're a full-time staff member, you have to be in housekeeping for at least 2 weeks, if not a month, and it's pretty tough and it's pretty exhausting. But it like makes everyone realize, okay, they're here to work hard, but we also have a really fun environment. So pretty much people who aren't cut out for the job, like people who have like illusions of just meeting like amazing travelers and just like talking rubbish, like they drop out. So they don't make it through that period. So the people that we're left with are like always amazing. So if we're hiring for like one position, I'll always take on 2 or 3 people because I know that they will drop out, but the ones that stay are amazing.
I think there's one interesting fact compared to Brazil. Like in Brazil, working in a hostel, you need to speak English, and I'm very demanding with the level of English. So a lot of people that worked for me, they were like upper, like higher class, like they had formal education. So they were just actually there because that's why I think the turnover is so much bigger in Brazil.
Don't give a shit.
I'm sure what's going on with the other 2 right now. You guys good?
Yep.
All right.
We have some.
Say again.
Okay,
We have some volunteers present,
Perfect.
but we try to stop them, but it's not easy. They want to be on the camera.
Got it. Perfect. So with Bebeto and Kim, with your hostels and having, because you both do use volunteers, do you have, well, in general, do you have anyone live on site? Obviously, volunteers are work exchange, but where do your volunteers stay? As in, do they stay in dorms with the regular guests, or do they have like a separate volunteer-only area? And do you have anyone else that lives on site, like a manager or any paid staff?
Yeah, in my case, I didn't have that many rooms, so they would stay inside the hostel. I always also like to have them stay in different rooms, so they would get to know that room. They would take care of that room as well. And they would keep it tidy a little bit. There was a time that I had a separate apartment in Rio because I was living there, so I'll just let my staff live there when I wasn't there. I've always lived in the hostel or with them, so that was never a problem. But most of the time, yes, they're inside the hostel.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Martin, sorry, Kim, 1 second. Martin and Vesna, can you just mute your microphone because it's picking up feedback from you guys? Thank you. Awesome. All right, Kim, go ahead.
So yeah, we and like I would not want our volunteers to be in rooms with guests because the staff house gets pretty stiff, like it's pretty gross. And we realized they also need a place to chill and kind of be themselves and walk around in their boxes and do whatever. In Johannesburg, we have it the same, like we have staff rooms. Yeah, and we've like, they look very different to the guest rooms. So we just like absolutely make sure that they don't ever sleep in guest rooms. Because I find like once you start blurring that line, then it becomes really difficult. Like, oh, but my buddy came over and he slept here. And I'm like, okay, but you know, where's the charge? And so for us, it was good to always keep it completely separate and have a limit as well, because otherwise of being friendly, but then you can't be friends with everyone. It's quite tricky. So yeah, we keep them separate.
And when you say staff area, is that just for work exchange volunteers, or also you have paid staff that live on site?
No, we've got like here in Cape Town, we have no paid staff that live on site. Here we have 1 bed because transport is an issue sometimes. So we have a spare bed, so they can sleep over, but there's a limit. You know, you can't all sleep over. And we don't have any managers on site, and I encourage the managers to not be on site because I want them to have a social life. Like I want them to have a life away from the hostel.
And so do you just, I think maybe you cut out, sorry. Can you hear us? I think you froze.
Sorry?
Okay. It froze completely after you said you want them to have a social life.
Yeah, because if they don't have a work-life balance, if they don't have time to, you know, create relationships with real people and with people outside of the hostel, then they will only stay for a short time. You know, like our managers have got hobbies, you know, like their mountain bike or their runners, and I make sure that we have people who are going to leave the hostel and come back like refreshed with new ideas and inspiration. And like, they must expect them to work like 18, 20 hours a day. Like they must work smart and then go home, like relax, recharge, and then come back.
And so you must have like a day manager, a night manager, if you don't have someone living on site. That kind of spans the whole.
We kind of also, we have duty managers at reception. So they're just people who we feel can deal well with guests. They're not particularly, you know, they're still in their early or mid-20s, but they're people. They're just good with people. So if there's someone who comes down and they're okay, like in our case, that's not a reason to call the general manager. Like, you know, if something, then the general manager should be there. But if it's like, you know, the water's cold or I don't know, something smaller, then we train the duty managers to be able to deal with that.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. And Vesna and Martin, I already asked you about how long your paid staff stay, right? You guys said about a year. And oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong question. Do you have anyone live on site? That's what I wanted to make sure I asked you.
Yes, we do. Okay, starting with some basic infos. We have volunteers in all of our hostels since 5 years. We did experiment with different setups. So we were thinking about to rent a separate flat for them, but we always ended up that they are staying in the hostel, and we don't mind blurring the lines. I don't think it creates any kind of problems if they stay in guest rooms sometimes, but we try to avoid that. And basically, the volunteers have a separate room in all of the hostels, but we don't mind if there's an overlapping, like, let's say there are 4 beds in the volunteers room, and there's a 5th volunteer for a couple of days, or somebody's leaving a bit later than, because we're not that
Our
strict
volunteers
with
never want to leave. I'm not joking. Seriously, I constantly have overlapping. Yeah.
And basically, I don't know what did she say before, but we love everybody, and they love us. I don't know how we do this, but we do it. So they stay for longer all the time, and we're not just talking about volunteers, but of course guests as well. But I'm not trying to advertise our hostels, but the way we do this thing is not very different than the way we treat guests. So volunteers are the part of our family.
Exactly.
So this is a hostel family, and this is not like people who come over for a couple of weeks to help around the cleaning.
Yeah.
This is completely different. We always have birthday parties for volunteers, have sorry. So we have birthday parties for volunteers. We have dinners for volunteers. They organize activities together. Sometimes they involve each other, or they involve the guests, or they just do, like, we even do competition, like beach volleyball competition in between hostels, competitor hostels, yes, in Las Palmas. And we always try to give extras for the volunteers to stay with us and help us, like free tours of our partners. They even have free caving activities, drinking parties for free, because our partners offer free tickets from time to time to enter the thermal spas or their party boats or whatever. So we try to
cool stuff.
You really spoil them, honestly. And the very important thing that we want our volunteers to mingle with guests. That's one of their tasks as well.
Yeah, of course. So with that, with that in mind, I should say, kind of segues into our next section of questions. which is more about staff style and, you know, how they work together and get to know each other. So we know that volunteers in work exchange at any hostel will usually, you know, interact with guests. That's one of the main reasons we have them, is really get to know them. But as far as staff bonding and having really camaraderie within your team, both with paid staff and volunteers, how well do your staff actually know each other? Like, first question, I guess, would be, how many staff do you actually have working at once? And with that, how well do they know each other, especially if only one or two might work at the same time? Is there a lot of camaraderie, like organically, if you will, between your staff, or does it tend to be more segmented? So we can start with you on that one.
I think, first of all, we have, sorry?
Oh, it's okay, go ahead.
So we have the hourly rates or weekly rates for how many hours volunteers have to help or to do their stuff, but we're not really stick with that. If they're good, they can do less. If we need them more, they're happy to do more. We never force them to do more, but they're absolutely happy to
just look at them and then they know.
do.
But they're very good
extras
together as well. That's what you asked. Like usually they really, like usually would have always two that are staying for longer. So the next one or two, they would just grow out together in the whole thing. Of course, it doesn't always work perfectly, but it was never, ever in my life that I have to send away a volunteer, which I'm really proud of, or never ever in my life they have volunteers that wanted to leave. So somehow it really works well, you know, like then, and I don't know, I just try carefully to choose volunteers. But as I said, you know, with volunteers, like a box of chocolate, you never know what you will get until you open it, you know, but usually they're really, really cool guys and girls.
But in terms of all of them together, do they tend to gel together pretty well, all get to know each other?
Most of the time they do, and they never want to leave. I'm not joking. And they make dinners together. They make dinners then involve guests as well. They make birthday parties here together. Now, when it was low season, they were making discos every night here, and I could see them on the camera, and I was really upset, you know, like, and things like that. But yeah, they feel like at home, and it's really great. But sometimes you have to tell them, okay, it's great that you feel like at home, but come on, you know, like, they're really good guys, and they really love each other most of the time.
And what about, is it the same thing with your paid staff as well? They tend to hang out together and do things together?
Together with volunteers, actually.
Not as much as volunteers,
I'm
in my
about
experience.
My stuff.
Martin, you tend to notice the difference between your paid staff and your volunteers in terms of hanging out together?
Yeah, I do, because I think, you know, all the volunteers, they cannot foreigners still. They arrive here, we try to make their stay comfortable, and they already arrive to an environment where they can feel at home. But it's a different thing for locals. So locals, not most of our staff, but some of our staff, they consider the jobs like job hours, and that's it. Like 4 o'clock, I'm leaving, and I'm going partying with my friends. But since volunteers, they live here, they're, she's saying it's not true.
Not in this hostel.
So, I understand what you're saying. That makes sense. Kim, do you tend to find something similar with, since you have a lot of paid staff, do they tend to kind of do their shift and go home versus hang out with other staff? Like, what kind of camaraderie do you see organically among them?
So we have like our like volunteer staff, they kind of, they're hanging around, being friendly to people and helping them out and socializing. But then a lot of what we do is actually taking people out of the hostel, just to, like, you know, maybe a little walking tour around, or in Cape Town, we hike up the mountain like at least once a week, or we'll go to a local farmer's market or whatever. And what we find is that the paid staff will join in on those activities just because it's a way to exercise and like meet people. Yeah, like every Friday we have Friday, it's about a lot of people socializing. Yeah, so they kind of, in doses, they all are mates with each other. they all hang out, and I think they make friends. And that's why we also don't allow people to stay less than 3 months, which is tricky because it's a bit of a visa implication. Like you basically have to stay for the whole time that you're allowed in South Africa.
You're talking about volunteers versus paid staff.
Volunteers, yes. And the reason why we want them to stay that long is because they have time to form relationships, like friendships. And yeah, they really, they do get on really well, and they, you know, they'll all go like clubbing together afterwards, after work, or yeah, and but it's healthy because at one stage the turnaround was just too quick. We'd have like 10 new volunteers every month, and it was like too much partying, like too much craziness, too many new people. And then I must say, actually last week, like it was the very first time we've had a bad experience where one of the workaway staff, actually, like someone we found on that website, actually like stole other staff's belongings, like necklaces, iPod, like laptop, like actually kind of went and took all their belongings, which was so awkward because it was someone from overseas, like who's traveling. So you kind of assume that they've got the bucks and that they're like, you know, just a happy-go-lucky traveler, and it was so awkward. Yeah. We like caught her completely red-handed. We had to be like, can you please give all these things back now? And please leave. And it was so awkward. Like, I think our GM is like super kind, so I don't think he even said anything on her profile or whatever, but like that, and that's the first time that has happened.
I would have a hard time not putting something on profile because you don't want that to happen again to somebody else. Like, I don't know, maybe even if you didn't go into detail, but say we did have an incident, but like, that's pretty.
I agree.
No,
I know. It's like so hectic. And because, you know, you walk into the room where everyone's comfortable and you tell people to lock stuff away, and there are lockers and there are safes, but everyone does just leave things charging and lying around.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, you go to bed, you take your watch off, you take your necklace off, like you don't, you know, you have to trust each other. So that was like, and we have had like 1 or 2 people who are like really into like heavy drugs and stuff like that's been pretty intense. But apart from that, like really we've had a lot of volunteers and we haven't had any incidences.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of socializing, they do socialize.
I think it froze again.
Maybe 80% local, which is interesting. So most of them are students and they just love like hanging around foreigners and like showing them their city and whatever. So they're actually doing volunteering, but they're from here.
Okay, cool. And Bebeto, what about you with your paid staff? It sounds like everyone's kind of got the same deal with volunteers. They're all hanging out with each other and having parties and that kind of stuff. But what about your paid staff? Are they kind of clocking in and going home, or do they really hang out with each other? Is there more than one working at a time to where they get to know each other?
No, they've always been one per shift. My places are always been quite small, but they were always there. I lived at the hostel for 5 years in the beginning, 5 years, but they've always hanging around. I've always
It froze on my side. I don't know if Martin, can you still hear them? It froze. Okay.
Yeah, it froze. It's kind of hard to hear them
And
sometimes
understand, yeah,
and
what they're
understand.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying. We're all trying.
South Africa internet is not always the best. Bebeto, Kim, can you guys hear us?
Yeah, we have fast internet.
It's probably my fault. Did you guys hear me?
Now we hear you, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, no, they always hang out there. We always had, it was fun to be at one time, like for the staff, including. So they were always around. They would stay a little bit longer than their shift. They would come back at night for some drinks. They've always been around. It's always been fun.
Okay, great. So then moving on to kind of next question related to that. Do you have issues at all with staff being cliquey? So this can be different, again, volunteers versus paid staff. but especially if staff do like to hang out with each other, do you have the issue with they all kind of want to hang out and they then, whether consciously or not, don't include guests? I know a lot of volunteers are there to interact with guests, but there can be the issue where they just want to like have a party with each other. It's easier to, you know, get to know each other and not have to do the whole introduction thing. Do you see this happening, and what do you do about it? Bebeto, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, that happens from time to time, and I kind of feel like it would happen when the season goes down. There are less guests, so the less guests they have in the house, the more they tend to stay in their group. They don't care about the 1 or 2 people there, but when there's more, they kind of force to. That happens a lot. I get annoyed if I'm around. I break. And I think that's a trait of personality as well. So yeah.
Like what we found in Joburg was that we had an issue because a lot of our staff amongst each other spoke a different language. So they wouldn't be intentionally trying to cut people out, but maybe they'd be cooking a meal together and they'd be like laughing and joking, but they'd be talking in like Tswana and not in English. And so they would be really open to people joining in, but like they're just by virtue of the fact that they're not speaking English, they're like not approachable. So you have to just remind them, guys, just speak in English, and then suddenly the whole thing changes, you know. Yeah. And we have a very structured timetable for the volunteers, mainly because we are in cities where there's a lot of activity going on, and a lot of them go outside like often. So they've got their 5 hours a day, and then on those 5 hours, like they know what they've got to be doing. So there's always one person who's like mellowing around, and then there's usually always one person who's got an activity that they're hosting. And like they have to host that activity. So it is like very intentional. And then kind of if they're in their free time, they just naturally make friends with people, I think. But they can be cliquey because of the language. Like for us, language is a thing.
That makes sense. And Marton and Vesna, what about you guys? Do you tend to see kind of staff cliques forming? And if so, what do you do about it?
Yeah, language is absolutely a key. It happened in Las Palmas that we have like too many Italian volunteers at the same time, and yeah, it happens that they go cliquey. Italians.
Italiano
and
only.
They also speak English, but
Italian.
you know, che cazzo. So also we had the same thing happen with Polish volunteers. I don't know, for some reason it happened for us. It happened with Italians and Polish people, probably because we're in Europe and you know it's a lot more. So the differences are pretty bigger than in between the states.
Language is a common denominator for all of you of accidentally, whether purposely or accidentally, cutting off from the rest of the group.
We're trying not to get out of 4 or 5 volunteers. We're trying to get not more than 2 people speaking the same language if it's possible. And it's also important to talk about the way we choose volunteers. We just did a new setup where there is a manager going specifically for choosing the volunteers, having a Skype interview with them, and then the same person is training them when they arrive. So they kind of link with the same person, and it's not the general manager of the hostel. This is another person who actually, the person in Las Palmas in our hostel is responsible for the housekeeping and the volunteers only.
Okay.
Besides doing a couple of reception shifts. So I think this works a lot better than it was before, that the general manager was choosing all the volunteers, and why
in Budapest it's still like that.
Yeah, it's still like that, but we're gonna change that as well. So I think the way we're going is this, that we're gonna have a specific person who's going to choose the volunteers, talk to them, make sure that they speak a good level of English, they fill their criterias, and they're gonna do an interview with them, and when they arrive, they're gonna train them as well.
encourage them to hang out with everyone, basically?
Well, if they choose the right person, you don't need to encourage them.
Well, that's true. We tend to have the last hostel that I was at, we ran mostly off volunteers, and I saw that we'd have issues with the staff, meaning the volunteer staff, sometimes becoming cliquey, not even on purpose, but because they all live together and they get to know each other and they lived in a staff dorm together, that if they came into the common area and, you know, there's a volunteer working on shift and they come in from doing whatever, that it was sometimes easier to just go talk to the person they already know rather than introduce themselves to a new guest and go through that whole, you know, where are you from, blah, blah, blah. And so because of that, you know, comfort level, sometimes they would all be in the room talking and hanging out together and not really including new people. So that was something we had to bring them some awareness of more than once, because it was never really on purpose, but I think it just happens naturally. You know, as humans, we don't always want to make that effort. So yeah, it happens. Now kind of moving on to how you actually do or build camaraderie and staff bonding and team building. I think especially I'm curious to focus a little bit more on your paid staff on these questions, because, you know, we've talked a lot about volunteers and we've had another panel on volunteers. And, you know, we kind of know volunteers are there to interact and have fun, and they're there for a short time, so they want to do that. But with paid staff, especially if you have them for a year or more, it can be quite a bit different because they're kind of, you know, they're doing their shift and then they're going home. So how do you, as an overall, get them to really mesh together? So first question with that is, do you do any type of outside team building or staff activities? And if so, why is that important to you? Kim, we'll start with you.
With us?
With
So-
Kim.
Kim, okay.
Yes, Kim, hi. So we always try and roster different people together, like over the month. So we do a monthly roster that's available like in the third week of the month. You get the roster for the whole next month. Like the final roster is finished. So if people want to go away for a weekend, whatever they need to, let us know a few weeks in advance. And then we always roster different people together so that you always kind of end up working with everyone over the month. And you also got the same shift for that week. So you're working like morning shift for the whole week, and then you're working afternoon shift for the whole week, and then you work night shift for the whole week. And then it rotates like that actually over the year. And then, so you end up working with everyone else. And then as the shift starts, we have set shift time. So it's from like 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then from 2 o'clock until 10, and then from 10 until 7 again. So when you arrive at your shift, you do a check-in. So you're like, shit night, my boyfriend dumped me. You know, like, I'm super bleak because we've been dating for 5 years and now he just dumped my ass. So I'm like super down, but I'm glad I'm here and I'm going to pick myself up and I'm not going to be a moody bitch. That's Kim checking in. And then Bebeto will be like, blah, 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 blah. And page of sympathy. If someone's being super moody, we know why. If someone's like, you know, all perky, we know why. We can deal with them. We can reach out and help each other. And it just looks like and like, you're here to work, you're here to have fun, but like, we're in service, like, you know, let's work through and support each other. So that works really well. Every few months they kind of taper off and then make sure that they're back on track and we're cool. In terms of external team building, we do it maybe like at least once a year, if not twice a year. And we do fun, like random fun stuff. So I'll usually find like a bowling club or something which sells like super cheap alcohol. And like, you know, you take the whole team, you can just go do bowls and like have a bar tab and just all have fun and get drunk together and whatever. Usually something like outdoorsy or sport people normally wouldn't do, like something that like maybe they've never done before, and then they can like teach each other and whatever. Yeah, and we do a lot of educationals. only with permanent staff though. So like when it comes to tours, you know, we send them on road trips, like with partners that we have. We send them shark cage diving, skydiving, paragliding, like all these kind of things. And they usually will like take a buddy with them. So that's quite a cool way for them to bond. And like if they have a long weekend or road trip, yeah, so they really like maximize the fact that they're in the travel industry.
Yeah, I would speak a little bit from one's perspective as well. I've been around for a bit, and we just opened Joburg last year, and now we've been bringing people from Cape Town to spend some time here and sending them over there. We did the same between São Paulo and Rio. So come from São Paulo, meet the staff in Rio, go from Rio, meet the staff in São Paulo, get to know the city. So that's also when you have hostels in different. There's also something really cool to know each other. It's really nice.
Yeah. I would say that we more have got the other like I'm not such a big fan of like staff dating each other.
Say that last part again. Sorry, it cut out pretty badly.
I think the one.
You guys know,
that like everyone.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's cutting out so badly. Do you want to try turning your video off and maybe just using audio for a couple minutes and see if the quality improves?
Okay, how's that?
That's a lot better.
Okay, super. So no, I was saying like for me, it's the opposite also happens is that people get like too comfortable and then start like dating one another. You know, and that's the line that we have to draw. And I'm like, I have to pull out the code of conduct now, guys. You're not allowed to hook up with each other. Don't screw the crew.
Don't screw. I don't know why.
So, yeah, that's like
before, but that's great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but why do you do that? Why do you do that? I need to ask that.
I think that's great.
Why do you encourage them not to?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why exactly you're doing that? Can you please explain? Why cannot a volunteer date another volunteer or date a guest, or what's wrong with that?
Kim, I think that's for you.
Yeah.
So,
but
You can date whatever you want to. No problem.
Kim, can you hear us?
Okay, I guess the question was why we encourage them not to date each other.
Yes.
And from our side, I don't know, like, you know, there's a certain edge about someone who is like, who doesn't have their partner at work with them. So maybe they're a little bit more friendly. This week that like one girl was upset because her boyfriend was speaking to another girl from Sweden. And she was like, I didn't like the way you talk to that guest. And like, I mean, when I'm talking to hostel guests, I often am like over the top and maybe like overly friendly. And like, I definitely wouldn't want my partner to be watching me, you know, because we do overextend and we open ourselves up and we like,
You don't.
into it and like necessarily want your partner to be watching.
you don't want drama, I guess.
So, yeah, it basically cuts drama out, which I think is what you started to say, Bebeto.
Yeah, but that's it. We try to avoid the drama that would come up from situations like that.
Can't hear you.
You know, what's your opinion?
I think that these restrictions are horrible. I mean, you want people to be happy who work with you. You want to have good energy. So if you restrict, how can you tell them not to date or not to fall in love? Or if they fall in love, they cannot work anymore. I think it's horrible.
We have big fish babies around the world.
Yeah, that's my opinion. I think it's not
No,
such
like, don't get me wrong.
a job.
Like,
I think it's not that they work in NASA or whatever, or in some big corporate, you know, where they get millions and you can tell, okay, you cannot date that. I find this, I'm so shocked actually now with this, but I don't know what to tell. With us, we here, people just date guests and receptionists and volunteers, and everybody's happy. And we never had dramas, anything like that, at least from my experience, within my experience. So I found this quite shocking because this is hostel. We're talking about young people. We're not talking about, I don't know. It's really shocking.
Well,
for me.
Okay, so the thing is also, like, in Africa, there is a specific phenomenon, and Courtney, you've lived here, so I'm sure you know, that people come to Africa to go on African safari, which means they come here to like hook up with a black person. And it's like, they come here and they're like, well, beeline for someone and be like, I want to hook up with this person so that I can say I have done it. And we have that issue, and it's like a very real problem. And then what happens, you're sitting in a bar like 4 hostels down the drag, like on the coast, and you hear 2 girls talking, and they're like, oh my God, I hooked up with this.
I'm here.
It just cut out.
No, I also, no. So you hear like 2 people down the drag, like in another hostel, and they're like, oh, I hooked up with this guy called like Jono in a hostel. And it's like, no ways, I also hooked up with a guy called Jono in a hostel. It's like, oh my God, is it this hostel? And then suddenly everyone's like, oh my God, but I also. And like, I guess the thing is then suddenly it's like, oh, well, that's the hostel where you just go to like go on sex safari. Like, that is something that like we have punches of, you know?
Excuse me, can I ask something? Is this your staff or your volunteer?
Well, I mean, kind of either, you know?
Are you sure you're choosing the right volunteers and staff?
No, our staff don't do that.
It's not something that happens all the time. Just try to avoid
It's
it.
just like, it's something that I've heard at other hostels happening, like over the last 10 years. And I've always said, I don't want to be that hostel. Like, I do not want to be that hostel. And so that's why we have that rule. And don't get me wrong, we've also had hostel marriages and hostel babies, and like, we do support them, obviously. But like, what I'm saying is like, we don't want the drama. So if it is real love, of course we support it. And I think a lot of our staff, maybe 50% of our staff are actually dating past guests, but like full on, they've immigrated back to South Africa. You know, they just met at the hostel, and that's cool. Like, we don't disencourage that, and even staff members, but like it shouldn't interfere with their work. And maybe it's a cultural thing. It could definitely be a cultural thing, but like it can interfere. Like there is the opportunity for drama. Like in our context.
I think it's also to, you know, not to defend one point or the other, because I've been on both sides of the coin. I've actually seriously dated one of my past guests. But I also understand from being a manager the drama that people dating or hooking up can cause. But I think it might be what Kim's saying is, if you kind of have for her hostel, that policy from the beginning, that it avoids drama unnecessarily. But then if something legitimate comes about and you can see that it's a legitimate thing, that you support it, as long as it's not interfering with work. But you don't get the reputation that some of these other hostels in her area have had of people coming on, you know, sex safari, or you're just the hostel to hook up. It's kind of a reputation management thing, if you will. So I can kind of see both. Interesting question and interesting tangent to go on. I was very curious about that as well. So moving back a little bit to staff outings that don't involve hooking up, or staff activities, what kind of, or how rather do you do this logistically? So this is one question. One thing that actually prompted to have this panel discussion was watching a forum thread where a hostel was asking, hey, we want to do an all-staff outing, but a 24/7 business, somebody has to watch the hostel. How do you get all your staff together? So do you ever do a complete all-staff outing? And if so, how do you logistically handle this? Who's watching the hostel? Martin and Vesna?
I don't.
Well, actually from now, because what happened is that our hostel group got involved in a new hostel in Budapest. So we have the same location, 2 hostels. So from now on, we can do it. But before that, for 10 years, we couldn't, because there, as you say, somebody must be in the hostel. So and it's not just one person. Most likely if we're taking the whole staff out, we're not going for 3 hours. So most likely there must be at least 2 person missing from the group. So it's kind of complicated to do that. But going back to your previous question, or I don't know, it was the first part of this question, we're always trying to involve volunteers and staff into tours. For example, in our Las Palmas hostel, we're doing tours like beach tours, or we're doing mountain tours. We're doing different type of tours, and always when we have empty spaces in the car or in the van we're renting, we always fill it with volunteers or staff, so they can go together with other volunteers or with the guests. We always, from time to time, we organize free or like very discount, like half price activities for our staff and volunteers, from caving to just, we also do like free events.
He might kick me out after this. I really don't believe in this team building.
Okay.
I really decide the whole, just leave them alone. If they want to hang around, they can hang around. You know, because I think if you force people to hang around because of the, you know, like you can't force these things. It's the way they feel every day they come to work, how you treat them, you know, like, and how they get along. Sorry, we have guests in the meantime. How they get along with other guests or with other staff and volunteers, and then they can mingle it or not. If they cannot work, then they leave.
Yes,
you know,
but
whatever.
okay.
But I don't believe in that.
You also have to know that we have weekly staff meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right.
in the staff meetings, volunteers are also involved. So this is one thing. And the other thing is that we can still organize things for them. Just, for example, giving an example, they're not going to buy an expensive ticket for an adventure park. But if we buy it for them or we take them there, this is something is happening.
But my problem is if he doesn't want to go, or she doesn't want to go, but she feels like because you bought it for her, you have to go. And that's what I don't like at all about this team building. Let's try to find a nice word for it. I just don't believe in it, seriously.
Do you, I can understand what you mean, definitely. The point of view of it kind of, you know, forces team building, and that's when people are like, but what about a staff activity more in the mindset of it's a treat for them? So maybe they normally get discounts on tours and things like every hostel does, but what about if you guys pick an activity that everyone is like super stoked about, like, oh yeah, we all get to go, you know, kayaking or get to go on a brewery tour or something that's out of the norm, that's completely paid for all of them? Do you do anything like that, or do they look forward to something like that as like a treat, as a reward?
Yes and no. Okay, let me give you another example. And actually, this thing I recommend other hostels to do it. So it was the idea of a previous manager in Las Palmas, in the Big Fish Las Palmas, that we had a budget, which budget the volunteers can decide together to spend it on any activities, starting from making a tapas night to dinner to going out, and they need to use the budget smartly for the guests as well. Let's say they make a dinner, they spend like 40 euros on the dinner, and they collect some money from the guests. So this way, for example, at the end of the day, they have free food for everybody, for all the volunteers. Or if they make money on it, they can share it, or they can spend it on other activities or other things. They can even buy drinks for themselves on the money they make. For example, they make an activity like drinking games in the hostel, and there's a prize. Let's say 2 bottles of rum or whatever the price is, and they spend the money on it. But when a guest, like let's say we have at least 10, 15 guests joining the drinking game, and they make some money, they make an extra 10 euros, and then they can spend it on anything what they want, or they can keep on going.
So you can give an almost financial incentive to do things together, because then they can make money to support their own activities and things that they want to do.
Exactly, and okay, sometimes of course sometimes it happens that they loses the money, but then we put the money back. So it's really not about the money. It's
Yeah.
more about what's going on and the atmosphere in the hostel. So they do things together, and they do things together with the guests as well.
Okay, great. Bebeto, what about you? Do you guys have any all staff outings where you take everyone at once? And if so, how do you logistically do that?
Well, we were talking about leaving somebody behind.
You guys might have to turn your video off again to get your audio.
There you go. Do you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. So one thing for me that's super special is New Year's Eve, and for me it's a big, big thing. So we always have like a backup guy. The backup is like, I'll pay him some money, he stays at the hostel, but I make sure that everybody's out, all the staff that is around, they want to come. So we close the hostel in that sense, and we take everybody out. I would never.
Who did you say?
I would never leave anybody behind.
It had cut out for a second. Who did you say is the person that's staying back?
We have a backup.
Backup meaning like it's a hostel staff or like someone that's not normally a hostel staff?
It's completely unrelated. So we just call a guy and say, like, can you stay here tonight? Because we all want to go out. And there were times and we're all out. Don't come back before this time because we're going out, and I want everybody to be involved in this. So yeah, I think that's really, really cool. I think that should be done.
Okay. And Kim, do you have anything where you take everyone all at once? And if so, how do you do it?
Yeah, we do. Like I said, it's usually about once a year. And
It
we
cut
come
out.
and cover the exception. Oh, no. University students that come and cover reception. And then pretty much in the morning, like all the staff, even if they all finish the rooms, so that, you know, that let's say the rooms are normally done by 1:30, then we'll have the rooms done by like 12, and then we'll all head out pretty early. So that's why it's normally a daytime thing. Or we'll draw straws and like maybe there's one person who doesn't want to come with because they've got an exam the next day or something, like, and then they volunteer to like please not go. But most of the time, that's only happened once. Most of the time we just get someone from outside. As long as house is done, all hands on deck, we get ready to end.
So to sum up, because it was cutting in and out, you have all hands on deck in the morning, try to get housekeeping done earlier than it would normally be finished so that you can all leave together. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
And for doing something at night, once in a while, you'll have someone volunteer to stay behind, but otherwise you pull an outside person.
Yeah, exactly. And like at nighttime, they're usually, like for us, most people check in the late afternoon. So if we do something in the evening, yeah, like, you know, one person can handle it. Okay,
great. Yeah, we basically have done similar, just for anyone out there who's wanting to know how to do this. When we do all staff, I've usually or typically gotten someone from the outside to watch the hostel, frequently a past staff member who still lives in the city. So we've done that for watching the hostel during the day for about 4 hours while we go do a day thing. I've also had someone do that for something like New Year's Eve. We had a past guest who really wasn't a big partier, and he was more than happy to come hang out from like 10 p.m. to 3, 4 in the morning while we were all out, so that the hostel wasn't left empty. So definitely a past staff member is a good idea for anyone looking for something, or just someone in your community that you know and trust that's not necessarily a hostel staff. So last couple questions before we wrap it up.
One like to add something.
Yeah, sure.
Just I think also, like, what I forget every year is that it's one thing to have the person covering, but I always forget to have another person covering for the next 8 hours, because we all come back like pretty tanked. And it's like the one time that like everyone together, and then like usually drunk. It's cool to have someone because suddenly you realize, oh, actually.
But I think what I gathered is it's good to have someone for the next morning, because if you all go out and party and get drunk, you don't want to be that person that has to then jump on reception 3 hours later. Is that what you were getting at?
Yes, and moreover, like night shift, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I've been that person to come back at 8 a.m. and have to open reception, so that I was being nice to my staff that they didn't have to do it after we all went out on New Year's, and that's not fun. I remember a friend posting on Facebook one time that said, good parents get a babysitter for the night out, smart parents get a babysitter for the next morning as well. I was like, yeah, yes. I don't have kids, but I can only imagine having little ones waking you up after a night out. So with staff meetings, Martin mentioned that they have staff meetings. Do you guys also have staff meetings? If so, do these tend to be more just kind of like work focused, or are they actually something fun that your staff look forward to?
I think both. First of all, we use staff meetings to introduce new volunteers to each other. I mean, of course, they introduce themselves by the time they arrive, but this is more like an official way of, if it doesn't happen automatically, to put them into the group of the volunteers. So this way, they really understand that so everybody's equal. There's no like better volunteers or worse volunteers, or there's no reason why one volunteer is getting a different task than another, or there's no leader for the volunteers except the person who's training them. So they are really I believe that they became more like a group when they get introduced officially, while the manager of the hostel is there. And also it's formal and informal as well, because we always ask for their feedback besides the tasks we give them, and we're always trying to control if they're good in their tasks or not, and who's better than the other one in what ways. And we always try to keep the task which a person likes better than forcing any kind of task on someone. And we always ask their feedback, because there's a couple of things you cannot, whatever amount of money you spend in a hostel, you just can't buy it. And this is one thing what the volunteers does. They hang out with guests, and they have a lot more and different feedback from the hostel or from the side of the guest than anybody else could have. So I think the main reason why we are doing staff meetings to make sure that everybody's doing their test properly, and we always do the next week's activities. Like we're sharing the activities by day. So for example, in Las Palmas, Thursday, always tapas night. Everybody goes out and goes to the downtown and the Vegeta, and they're enjoying the €2 drinks with food, and each day we have activities. So every day, even if it's just a movie night, there's a person responsible for the movie night, that the movie night happens. So they just put on a movie, they make popcorn and small things. It doesn't look that important, but it is important.
Well, I think we all know how. But as far as your staff meeting goes, sorry, it's giving a lot of feedback on me. They tend to be both fun, a mix of fun and work. Is that correct?
We always have like ice cream or chocolate or drinks on the staff meeting. So we're a lot more, we're not that formal.
Okay, cool. And Kim and Bebeto, do you guys do staff meetings? And if so, do they tend to have some element of, fun or something that staff look forward to beyond just hearing about work? Can you guys hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, cool. So our staff meetings are pretty, like we just run through things that are happening in the hostel. We also go through the activities and also make sure that our permanent staff, actually even end up chatting to guests, like guests will ask them what to do. So they're all on board as well. We go through our like weekly targets and budgets and things like that as well. In our tour desk department and in our beds department. So we tell them what the monthly target is. We tell them how far we are. We tell them how much more, you know, we've got to sell. And it's really nice. Like I like having such a big, like an open book relationship. And it's only been the last, let's say, year and a half that it's been like that. And it's made the world of difference. So we have little competition with the staff, and like yesterday we came up with a new thing, like a shout out. You know, like, you know, if someone's done a really nice yoga lesson or something like that, we do a shout out. And then like yesterday we had a meal cooked by one of the staff, so and have a meal together, which is always nice. Yeah. But they are pretty structured. Like we actually yeah, like our staff are pretty, so they like the structure kind of just works here. So yeah, we kind of, if we go around the table, we discuss things and we minute them. We have like, can go over last week's meeting, etc.
So you find even though it's like a little bit more formal in terms of being work related, that being really open book in terms of like your sales targets or your goals and doing competitions, does that kind of make it a little more inviting and engaging, if you will, to where the group kind of comes together?
Yeah, totally, because they're not just working for, like, you know, it's not just like, oh, we're going to work for someone else's business. Like they know what we're working for. They know that like every time they're friendly with someone or every time they check someone super quickly and swiftly, you know, it'll make for a better experience and they will, like, you know, most likely extend. Yeah, and it's worked for us to get everyone on board. And there's a lot of joking that happens. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of teasing, like in a good way.
Yeah.
A lot of teaching as well, like person to like doing it. Like, oh, I don't wait till after the guest is checked in, but as they check in, I ask them like, you know, do you have any activities planned? Can you, like, how about you join us tomorrow, whatever, so that other staff can learn from that.
Yeah, definitely. And Bebeto, anything you want to add as far as staff meetings? All the work part aside, do you have anything that kind of makes them more fun or engaging for staff to look forward to?
Yeah, I'll say that unfortunately, it seems like being a hostel 24/7 business, everybody's here all the time. In general, we don't do much like outside activities. We don't have like the weekend off, so we can all do something random together. And the meetings end up being a bit anyway. But yeah, I think that as an industry, we should like try to find more ways to do that. I think we're lacking on that.
Okay. And with that, what would you say is kind of a final wrap-up question for all of you? You know, you were saying, Bebeto, that you think we can improve on that as an industry and be better. What do you think individually is your biggest challenge with staff? Not necessarily in terms of training and all that kind of stuff, because that could be a whole nother discussion, but your biggest challenge more with really having that solid team, especially when you have high turnover, you have volunteers in and out. What's your biggest challenge with getting everyone to effectively work together, you know, as one unit? Martin, do you want to start?
Yep, I think choosing the right people is the key. I just we are running out of time a little bit, so I just like to show you a picture. This is a picture of our volunteer's fingers. He has the logo of our hostel tattooed on his fingers. That happened like almost 2 years ago, and now he's the manager of our hostel in Las Palmas. So choosing the right people is the key.
We have several people that have our anchor logo tattooed that were staff while I was there. They wanted me to get it too, and I was like, I like my tattoos. I don't want another one right now. I loved my hostel. I wasn't ready for another tattoo, but that's pretty cool. Choosing the right people is a great answer. And Bebeto and Kim, what about you guys? What is your biggest challenge, and how would you overcome that in terms of your staff being together?
Thank you. We like our staff are in a really good space at the moment, and I'd say like my biggest challenge is finding a manager, like a leader for them. So, you know, who's the person who's gonna like be the maestro, as Bebeto likes to say, like really make sure that each person is playing their beautiful tune and that it comes together like in one amazing orchestra. So, you know, seeing potential in people. Yeah, I think for me, finding the right manager has been the biggest challenge. Like, we're in a great space now in Cape Town. We currently do not have a manager in Johannesburg. Yeah. For me, it's like I'm super picky. I've been interviewing for 8 weeks now, and I still can't find someone who's ideal.
Definitely, it can be a challenge. I hear this question from people all the time: is how do I find the right manager? Someone who wants to manage as almost as if it's their own business, even though it's not. And Bebeto and I have talked about this before, but I do think that the best staff. Definitely, it's a combination of the two things you guys said. As Martin said, picking the right people, but then definitely having someone that they can emulate that really encourages everyone, you know, coming together and working together. So, and got a little wave there. Hello. So, yeah, basically, both those things together, in my opinion, I think make the best possible mix of getting it all to mesh. So, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up because time. But thank you guys so much for joining. Hopefully people got some good ideas and info out of this, and we will see you all again soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.